It was September 21st, 2005, a warm Californian afternoon. At the Burbank airport, hundreds of people were busy with routine travel. Among them were 140 passengers who had no idea that the flight they were about to board would turn into a living nightmare, a story that would later be broadcast live across America. The aircraft waiting on the runway was JetBlue Airways Flight 292, an Airbus, a 320. Its destination, New York City. Its captain, Scott Burke, a man with years of flying experience. At exactly 3 p.m., the control tower gave clearance, and at 3:17, the jet roared down the runway and lifted gracefully into the sky. Families waved goodbye, unaware that they might never see their loved ones again. Inside, the passengers settled into their seats, fastened their belts, and prepared for a routine 5-hour journey. But fate had other plans. Barely 15 minutes after takeoff, whispers began inside the cabin. Some passengers noticed that the plane wasn't climbing properly. Instead of soaring higher, it seemed stuck at a low altitude, circling strangely over California. Confusion turned to unease. And then, the dreaded sound came the chime of the captain's announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing some technical difficulties." The words, calm but heavy, sent ripples of panic. Passengers exchanged frightened looks. Some assumed an engine had failed. Others feared a loss of power, but the truth was far worse. In the cockpit, warning lights screamed relentlessly. The aircraft systems were reporting a serious problem with the landing gear. The nose wheel had locked at a 90-degree angle, turned sideways. Impossible to retract, impossible to straighten. A mechanical flaw so rare that even the captain was stunned. And yet, every second they stayed in the air with this malfunction, danger grew. Captain Burke made a bold decision. He lowered the altitude and steered the jet toward Long Beach Airport, so the control tower could visually inspect the damage. Controllers zoomed in with their cameras and confirmed the worst. The nose wheel was twisted completely sideways. Landing in this condition could mean disaster. If the wheel collapsed or burst into flames, the fire could spread instantly to the fuel tanks. And on board that day, there were more than 14,000 kilograms of jet fuel, the weight of 12 family cars, enough to turn the jet into a fireball. As if that wasn't terrifying enough, another blow came. News helicopters had already captured live footage of the crippled jet circling over California. Television channels began broadcasting the images across the nation. And then, passengers inside the aircraft discovered that JetBlue's in-flight televisions were airing the very same news. Imagine the horror sitting in your seat at 35,000 feet, watching live coverage of your own potential death. Some passengers wept silently. Others clutched the hands of strangers. One man even recorded a farewell message for his family on a camcorder. The tension was unbearable, but Captain Burke was not ready to give up. He knew that if he attempted to land with full fuel tanks, the odds of survival would plummet. His only chance was to burn as much fuel as possible. For the next 3 hours, Flight 292 circled endlessly above the Pacific Ocean. Passengers stared out at the endless water below, knowing that time was running out. Slowly, the massive weight of fuel decreased, leaving just enough for one final approach. Los Angeles International Airport, busiest in the world, was chosen for the emergency landing. It had the longest runways, the best emergency response teams, and every possible resource that might save the passengers' lives. On the ground, fire trucks, ambulances, and rescue crews lined the runway. The world held its breath. Inside the cabin, the captain gave final instructions. He asked the crew to prepare for crash position, the brace position, where passengers lean forward with heads down, arms protecting their heads. A chilling reminder that survival was not guaranteed. The cabin fell silent, broken only by the muffled sobs of terrified travelers. At last, the runway came into sight. The captain guided the aircraft gently downwards. First, the rear landing gear touched the ground with a screech of rubber. The plane shook violently but held steady. For a few seconds, hope flickered, and then the inevitable came. The twisted nose wheel slammed onto the tarmac. Sparks exploded. Flames burst instantly from the front of the aircraft. Inside, passengers gasped as heat and smoke filled the air. The jet hurtled forward, metal grinding against asphalt, fire threatening to consume everything. Yet, through skill and sheer willpower, Captain Burke held the aircraft steady. Inch by inch, the plane slowed. The fire roared but did not spread. Finally, miraculously, the Airbus skidded to a halt. For a moment, there was silence. Then, cheers, sobs, and prayers filled the cabin. Against all odds, every single passenger was alive. Rescue teams rushed to the jet, extinguishing the fire and evacuating passengers one by one. When investigators later examined the landing gear, they found that a small mechanical lock had failed, twisting the wheel sideways during takeoff. A tiny flaw that could have killed 140 people, but it didn't, thanks to the calm judgment and extraordinary skill of Captain Scott Burke. Flight 292 became a story not of tragedy, but of survival. A nightmare turned miracle, and yet, for those passengers, the memory of watching their own potential death on live television, thousands of feet in the air, will never be forgotten. This is the story of JetBlue Flight 292, a story that reminds us of the thin line between life and death in the skies, and of the heroes who guide us safely back to Earth when everything seems lost.